Today we're reviewing Strontium Dog from Warlord Games, right after this. Before we get into today's video, I just want to say that this review has been made possible by Warlord Games, who sent over a copy of Strontium Dog for me to review free of charge. It's important for you to know that this has not affected my opinion or review in any way, shape or form, and if you'd like to read more on the importance of ethics and integrity here in the Tabletop Hub, have a look in the video description. Now, back to the video. Hey everyone, Sam here from the Tabletop Hub, your one-stop shop for all things tabletop, and today we're reviewing Strontium Dog, a skirmish level game set in a distant future where nuclear warfare has created a wave of mutants who are segregated and prejudiced against. They can't own businesses and most jobs are ruled out for them, but one of the few jobs they are allowed to do is that of bounty hunting. And so mutants spread out across the galaxy hunting down criminals for the search and destroy agency, earning them the name of Strontium Dogs. The world is weird, it's wonderful, and it is brutal. One moment you could be on the far reaches of space, the next you're bizarrely in hell. The world of Strontium Dog is full of possibility, and the new tabletop game from Warlord Games does a really good job in affording players that same freedom of possibility, which I'll talk about a bit more later in the video. But first, let's talk about what's in the box. So this is the good, the bad, and the mutie starter set. It costs £50 and it contains everything you'll need to play on the tabletop. You've got a paperback rulebook, a scenario booklet, the game markers, dice, the miniatures, and even some terrain. Now let's talk about the miniatures. When I first picked up the box for this game, it felt heavier than I was expecting, and that's because the miniatures here are all made out of metal. And I know this is going to sound really strange, but there's just something quite satisfying in having that weight in the miniatures themselves. I've been playing with a lot of plastic or resin minis recently, and this really just helps set them apart. There are 8 miniatures in the starter set in total. You've got Max Bubba and his gang and Johnny Alpha and his team, enough to get you started, and you can build upon this collection with more worthy foes or search and destroy agents from Warlord's online store too. Aside from that, I think the terrain that you get in the starter set is a real asset. You see, the game comes with a scenario booklet, and unlike some games where you realise that you've spent goodness knows how much money on the actual game and then have to break the bank all over again to make a functioning game board for the scenarios that the game comes with, everything in this booklet is achievable with what you've got in the box. Now this sounds like a really simple thing, but it really is a breath of fresh air and equally does set this game apart as one that's great for someone that's interested in getting into skirmish games or tabletop miniature games in general, but is worried about the overall costs that can come with it. Gameplay for Strontium Dog is pretty straightforward. Players take it in turns to activate their characters and fight it out on the game map. You can get your characters to take up to 2 actions per turn, like move and shoot, or use 2 actions to do something a little more epic, like take an aimed shot or charge an enemy, and you'll use the spatial 2000 AD dice as well as a couple of d6s to play the game. With regards to all that, it's all pretty standard, and the rulebook does a great job of making everything understandable. The only issue I have with the gameplay itself are these markers. You see, when you're pinned or when you take damage or when you're overexerted, you place these little markers by your miniature, and when you're just starting out and getting to grips with the game, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and it feels like Johnny Alpha is just getting gradually bogged down in a sea of administrative paperwork when you see them surrounding your minis. Keeping track of what these counters represent and their place in the game board, of course, does become easier with time, but when you're learning the basics of the game, they can seem a little bit cumbersome. The thing, though, that I really love about the game when it comes to playing it on the tabletop is initiative. You see, Strontium Dog has this underlying cinematic style to it. Every character you can play as or fight against has a cool stat, and this will determine whether or not they freak out and are pinned when under fire, but it also determines which activation token they're assigned. If your character has a cool of 4 or less, they get a standard token. If it's more than 4 though, they get one of these special star tokens. Now initiative in Strontium Dog doesn't work like other games. It's not a case of you go, I go, back and forth. All of these tokens are put into a bag or a cup or the skulls of your enemies, really whatever you've got lying around, and players draw a token from the bag. Now whoever the token corresponds to gets to activate a character. So in theory, depending on what tokens are drawn, one player could get to activate 3 times before the other player has even had a chance to go. And while your initial thoughts on that may be, well, that doesn't sound very fair, it isn't, really, but it makes for a really interesting game. The gameplay flow is no longer a case of thinking, Well, I'll activate this model and then head over there and then shoot that person next turn. You've got to think 2-3 turns ahead and equally look at what position all your other models are in on the game board, because there's absolutely no guarantee that you'll get to go next. It forces you to use a chess-like mindset rather than a linear one. And here's my favourite part. These activation tokens with the star on them, they can be put back into the token pool once they've been used if you roll the correct dice. You see, any of the activation tokens can be used to activate any of the models. You don't have to use the star tokens to activate your biggest and bestest characters. It just helps you more if you do, because once you use one of these star activation tokens, you can roll the dice, and if you get a 2000 AD marker on your roll, it gets put back into the pool. Now, when I played a demo of this game at Tabletop Gaming Live, I wanted to see how far I could push this mechanic, and with the luck of the dice, I was able to use it to activate Johnny Alpha 4 times. It turned the tide of the game for me, and it made this really epic cinematic moment on the table. If it sounds overpowered though, don't worry, it really isn't. If you decide to roll to try and get the token put back into the token pool and you fail, your character will be overexerted, and it actually lessens their ability to counter the attacks and actions of your enemies next turn. Strontium Dog is fast-paced, it's fun, and it is full of guns, guts, and glory. But in closing, there are 2 more things that I really love about this game. Player freedom, and the fact that this game gives you the tools to use all those other games you've been neglecting. You see, there's a lot of info in this rulebook, and if you flick through it, near the end you'll see the chapters on how to make your own character and how to make your own mutant. And it's not just a generic kind of choose a weapon, choose a race. This is pretty much a full-on character creator. You can make them a main character or just a background character. You can choose their traits, how many limbs they have, how messed up and mutated those limbs are. It gives you an opportunity to have fun and to create your own hero, your own avatar with which to play the game. And that leads into the final thing that I really like about this game, and it's that Strontium Dog gives you a reason to play with any and all of your other miniature games. I know that sounds kind of weird, but let me explain. The beauty of Strontium Dog is that in the actual graphic novels, there's time travel, where Johnny Alpha goes and basically hunts down Hitler. There's a moment where he travels to an alternate dimension that passes as hell. And knowing this gives us, as the players, a lot of excuses to brush the dust off some other miniatures that we maybe haven't had an excuse to play with for a while and go on a weird and wonderful campaign. I've got Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and that would perfectly pass off as a planet on the far reaches of the galaxy. And the same could be said if you've got a lot of 40k miniatures lying around. Maybe you've got the Batman or Harry Potter miniatures game and Johnny Alpha appears to claim the bounty on Voldemort or the Joker or maybe even the Batman himself. And I really wanted to experiment with the character creator recently and went and bought a couple of miniatures from Brother Vinny to make a Geralt of Rivia Strontium Dog to use with my Song of Ice and Fire miniatures. This aspect, combined with the character creator, just opens up a lot of possibilities for interesting scenarios in the game, and when I first discovered this, it just got my mind racing, and it was just fun. And I think that's the key word that comes to mind when I think about this game and when I play this game. It's fun. If you're looking for a fun skirmish game that is great for new tabletop players, I definitely recommend this. I'd love to see Warlord build upon what they've started here with future releases, and I sincerely hope that this isn't all we'll see from this game. But folks, that is it for today's video. I'll leave a link down in the video description to where you can go and pick the game up for yourself. But if this is the first time you've come across my channel, feel free to hit the subscribe button down below to be kept up to date with when new videos go live. But until next time, folks, have a great week, and I will of course speak to you all soon.